All right, what's going on, everyone? I think we're live. We're just waiting for Dean from the Up Is Down podcast. Hopefully, you guys can hear me all right, and I'll put the link in the Twitter on the Twitter sphere so you can join me that way. Hopefully, we're in a nice July 4th Independence Day or what do we call it? Yes. Oh my gosh, the 4th of July. I don't know why I'm not a good multitasker. Let me just get it up. All right. All righty. Now we're good. All right. And Dean's going to be joining us any second. We got a few things we're going to talk about here. He's a real well-versed guy. So for people like that, I should do a better job as a host and come like more prepared with questions and things like that. I know we talked about a few things about like McAfee and a few other things that were on our mind. I think we're both at like a similar point where, oh, here he is now. So we'll just wait. We'll let him come in. Dean,
Hey,
what's going on, dude?
not a lot, man. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Radical. I just got
Awesome.
everything all set up.
Oh, awesome, dude. And I'm just hitting record so we can so that's like a new feature Zoom added. Yeah. So how's it going, dude? Thanks. First of all, I guess everyone or introduce yourself for the podcast listeners and everything like that.
Well, it's going really great, dude. Thanks for having me on your show. I am the one and only Mr. Dean Reiner of the Up Is Down podcast. Somewhere out there in the dark, somewhere out there in the misty hillsides of Northwest Oregon.
Very cool, dude. And I think your title of your podcast perfectly encapsulates what's I don't know, at least how I've been feeling or how this world has been going recently.
Yeah.
With everything.
That. I mean, that's funny too, because when I started the podcast, it wasn't quite so upside down. And then it just seemed to be one of those providential things that happens when you do something and then you realize that you're right on time with that thing that you were doing.
I guess because you've been doing this for a long time, right? So
not really, only about a year and a half or so.
But I mean, like actually into the researching aspect of it.
Maybe a few years, probably 4, 5, 6 years, maybe, but not really doing any huge deep dives until maybe about 3 years ago when I just started getting I got triggered, man, getting triggered by certain things, and then just starting to see that there's way more than what meets the eye. And so my interests go all over the place from, I like to say that I like to kind of stay down here on the terrestrial plane. I go way up in a bigger kind of cosmic universal view a lot, because I think as above, so below. But my precision and the type of stuff that I tend to follow more closely are terrestrial type of social engineering, mind control tactics, and the people that do them and the people that it gets done to, including every one of us. And even in this moment right now, it's really fun, and it's scary, and it's just what it is. It's just what's going on.
Well, I know our first topic was I guess because that was one of your recent episodes, was like, I forget what you called the title, Mind Weapons, something like that, right?
Are you thinking about the WWMD squared? Mind Weapons of Mass Destruction and Disruption?
I think that I saw just like you did an episode recently about that. But I think that's like, because we kind of talked about that in our Twitter messages. But I guess, could you give us like a Cliff Notes version of what you mean by that, like mind weapons and what they're constantly doing to us?
Right. Well, it spans the spectrum between, electronic manipulation and flashes and television and screens to actual broadcasting of images, sounds, information, and trigger tones on people. It can go that way. It can be literally abducting people and scrambling their brains, or subtly doing it from afar, literally, I think that, it's funny because there's a lot of people that don't want to engage in technology so much, or they're terrified of phones, or they want everything like on a secure thing like Proton Mail and Signal, because they don't want anyone to know their business. And
Right.
I just know that if any one of these players in the bigger game wanted you for anything, they would have you anytime they want. They don't need you to necessarily allow them access on the terrestrial plane. And so, if they if they wanted you for any reason, all they have to do is just, for one thing, they could bypass your brain altogether and just beam in some CP images on your computer and say, look at this pedophile.
Dude.
We got this guy. And there's no way you could disprove it. There's no way that you could prove that it wasn't authentic, that it wasn't yours. They could do anything they want to you at any time.
And
Which
I know
leaves you feeling really powerless. And I think that's the larger message, is that anything they want to do to you, they can do, and they will do when they want. It just turns out that most people aren't a target.
Right. And I know like some people might think that sounds crazy, but I did an episode on HAARP like a while ago, and how who was like there's that Dr. Delgado in the 60s who figured out how to control a bull, like at first with impulses in the brain, and then he graduated from certain vibrations. And that was, now 60 years ago. And it's not like they were like, oh, that's pretty good, we're going to stop there. I think that's good enough. They only improved on that.
Oh yeah. And anything that we're seeing on the street level is already 25 years, done. They're already way ahead in the things that aren't available to us on the street level. And I think that's what's really scary about what we see to be happening, even with the spy planes that are flying over constantly. And if there's apps you can get for your phone where you can actually track these objects in the sky. You can track these planes, and most of the time they're not registered. They're Cessnas, and they're flying in circles around cities. Specifically, what I've been able to track is that they're flying circles around target zones, opportunity zones, when there's protests and uprisings and there's civil disruption happening. There's these planes that are just circling, and I don't know exactly what they're doing, but my suspicion is that they are using Stingray technology to mine everyone's data off of their phones and off of their computers, and they're just collecting it. They're either making profiles or they're sending messages back and forth, because Stingray technology can go both ways. And that's just street level shit that we already know exists and has been existing for a long time. A Stingray is like it can be about the size of a computer, or even like as big as like a briefcase, and it acts as like an intermediary between a cell phone tower and your phone.
Okay.
So it can basically intercept and transmit any kind of data between you and your cell phone tower. And so it's just like an interceptor. It just collects everything. It goes through the Stingray, and then it goes to the cell tower, and then you get your, you ping off your signal, you send your message or whatever. But before it gets to the cell phone tower, when the Stingray is employed, it goes to the Stingray box, and it gets collated there and then sent off somewhere else. And all that data is being analyzed and collected and condensed. And this shit's been around forever, and anyone can buy these devices. Anyone can buy them. They're about $180,000. But if you have disposable income and you're off rich, or you work for the government, or the government's paying you to do this kind of stuff because they don't want their agents doing it because of human error, because people are stupid, or because they want to set you up. First, they want to use you to use the technology to collect the data, and then they want to turn it on you and set you up, which takes them completely off the hook.
So you think they like third party or outsource it to whoever? Do you think that's like a common tactic?
I think it's the only tactic right now.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I think it's happening 24 hours a day all over the world. But you can really see it if you get, apps like Flight Radar 24 or whatever. You can see all these little dots, and we see it all the time. Even where we live now, we live a little bit not off grid by any means, but we're out of the metro area of Multnomah County for sure. We're in a whole different county, but we still hear and see planes and choppers going by strangely all the time, even though there's nothing going on. And we'll turn on the app and we'll look and see, oh, it's another one of those Cessnas. And the reason why it's like kind of sketchy is because every aircraft is obligated to list their flight times, when they took off, where they took off from, where they're heading, what altitude they're flying at, which direction they're going, and all that stuff is basically available on the app because it's a law. It's the FAA standard because everyone needs to know who's in the air and where they're going.
That
And
makes
a lot
sense.
of these little planes, when you look at it on this app, it just says NA, not applicable. But then you look at it at a different plane or a different chopper, maybe some other day, or you can just, this whole thing is, these kind of apps are interesting because you can scale back the view to see, okay, so this is happening right over my house. And you can scale back to see there's also planes in the sky over and say above Portland, or there's planes in the sky in Tigard, or I'm just speaking of Oregon places like
Right.
Salem, and you could pick on any one of those dots and just touch it. And then the information about that aircraft will show up. It'll say it's this kind of plane. It left at this time. It's flying at this altitude and it's heading to this place. But these other planes, you hit on the dot and it just says not applicable. In fact, we just saw one the other day we touched on and it said blocked.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that before. And I started paying attention to this Stingray stuff like 2 or 3 years ago, a little bit. I just thought it was interesting because I was looking at EMF type stuff, and I learned about Stingrays, and I found a website you can actually buy them. You can buy
Jeez, dude.
refurbished ones, and then over the protests and stuff last summer, we noticed and we heard these planes going around all night long, and they were just circling the north side of Multnomah River, or the Willamette River in Portland, the north side, which is like where all the protests were happening. They were circling right over the courthouse downtown, but on the east and north side of the river, it was just circling and circling and circling. And why, and there's some people that we know that work for government, or they fly and they say, oh, well, they're training. And it's just like, okay, I can only buy the training reason so many times. And then when you actually hear mainstream media and like NPR releasing articles talking about FBI spy planes over Kenosha and over Minneapolis during the protests, and you actually see that mainstream is looking at this stuff, you don't sound quite so crazy.
Right. Yeah. No, but that makes total, sense that they're spying. I mean, we have no privacy.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Because it seemed like since you're over in that area of Portland, you think that they're just collecting data on those people just to have it? Because you see or do you think they use it like on January 6th, like a Stingray to
Absolutely. I think both things are happening at the same time.
Okay.
And I mean, there's another thing I think it's happening I'll talk about in a minute, but what's interesting to me is that I think all of us human beings on Earth, and in America especially, are slowly being reduced down to binary ones and zeros. It's just all about data. It doesn't matter why you're reacting to something. All that really matters is your reaction. And it doesn't matter if you're reacting by yourself under the covers naked. What really matters is that you're reacting on a technological device somehow. You're communicating with somebody. You're either liking a post or a video, or you're making something, or you're sending something to somebody. That's all that matters in the end of the game these days. It's just all about data transfer. And so I think that's the real case, is that they're just scraping people's data. I think that I don't think that things like Signal are in any way secure. Telegram, not secure. I think they're actually technologies and platforms that are started by spooks and full of spooks. And I feel the same way about, this is going to be controversial, but I feel the same way about the Freedom Cells network that everyone's got boners for. I just don't believe that you can have freedom in a cell. I think the two words are oxymoronic. And I don't think that, it makes people feel good. Right. And it is a really altruistic, benevolent, perhaps even, agorist and anarchist method and movement. But I don't think that any of these things are completely without some sort of infiltration by intelligence agencies. I just think they're totally full of spooks. But that doesn't stop me from using Signal, and it doesn't stop people or me from, using Proton Mail. I don't use Proton Mail, but I've seen mainstream articles talking about how Proton Mail was started by the CIA at MIT.
Mm. Dude, well, The Onion, like Tor, and I'm not the tech guy in the world, but that was started by like either Mossad or whoever. And they needed the general public. Because for everyone that doesn't know, Tor is like how you get on the dark web, and someone might rip me because that's like the wrong, but that's what I know it's for. And it like moves your whatever, your whatever, but they needed people to fill it. So that's why it was created by spies so they could hide, but they needed the public to use it. So there was more data points to hide behind, or something like that. You might know that better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that much more about it, honestly, besides I know that it's a system of data transfer that fractals and obliterates your signal so that it's nearly impossible to put back together in any kind of a code.
Yeah.
So it's just like millions of pieces of data that just get fractaled out and shattered. And so that's what makes it like untrackable and untraceable. And maybe that's true. I'm totally wrong. I don't know.
Yours sounded much more professional than mine. So that was good. But this,
yeah, I just don't know. But I think, as far as like scraping people's data, I mean, because if what we know is that during the riots and protesting and stuff last summer, the organized people and the useful idiots that were out there doing their dances and stuff, that they were coordinating all of their efforts through Signal. Because they weren't gonna, because they wanted to be secure, and I think that these Stingray devices and these spy planes, maybe they're not even FBI. I mean, there's to think that there's only like FBI and CIA and NSA, like those are just the face of a much larger octopus, in my opinion. There's so much more going on in different types of organizations, but to think that people could be communicating and coordinating their movements off the grid and off the radar of these type of people. So I think that these Stingray devices are scraping all that data and making cases on people. And one thing that kind of proves it, maybe in a benign way, was that in Portland last summer, there was an incident during one of the riots when someone, some fucking clown. I hope it's okay if I use that.
Oh, you're good, dude. You're good.
Some clown was jumping, as they do, in front of a moving vehicle, trying to get it to stop. And dude just laid down on the pedal and just took off in his truck and just kept driving. And it was this big thing. And of course, the police are kneecapped for the most part to do anything about it. The dude drove away. And then within an hour or so, there were federal agents knocking on his door because they saw him. They were watching him from these planes. It wasn't that anyone had his license plate number or could find out where he lived in such a short amount of time. Like an hour after he left the scene, there were feds at his door saying, you left the scene of a crime. And how do they know that? Because they were literally watching him from above. And yet Oregon boasts, Multnomah County boasts that they don't have planes, that they don't have police planes, but there's video of police planes. I mean, even at the tail end of the riots last year, when all the jokers were downtown just spinning donuts in cars. That's all they were doing, was just spinning donuts and blocking intersections, because the whole downtown area where this shit was happening was pretty much a no-go zone. And there were no cops and there were no people around there besides all the clowns and protesters. So they were just having fun towards the end of it and just doing like drag races and spinning donuts. And there's police video in airplanes just hovering over, watching these guys do this. So they totally lie, saying that they don't have these planes. And if they have these planes, they got them from somewhere. And if they're on there collecting data, they're probably using Stingray technology. And I think that they can also put images and put things on people's phones. But I think it's much more nefarious than that, honestly. I think that people have, especially when you start going up into a larger kind of a cosmic spiritual overview, which is hard not to do when you start questioning why these things are happening and how is this behavior seeming to be catching fire and being so trendy and addictive. And even the people that you knew that you thought were fairly grounded are now seeming to be head over heels in love with this constant anxiety and fight for justice. It's like overnight, like a switch was flipped. In so many people. And I think that these devices, whether they're Stingrays or not, have the ability to emit signals to people's minds and control their behavior, just like that Delgado and the bull and everything else. I mean, I just listened to that dude William Ramsey. He had an older podcast from a few months ago talking with this fellow, I can't remember what his name is, but about electronic interference and about electronic harassment and gang stalking. And it's just like, I didn't really learn a whole lot from that podcast, but it's just nice to hear someone who actually studies it at a much deeper level than I do confirm basically all of my already established beliefs.
That's
I
it.
think I
Yeah.
think we can be used and manipulated by puppets through signals and through sounds, and I think that these planes are doing that.
That's it. See, I mean, I don't doubt that at all. I almost think we're like even so much easier than that to even like control that I almost believe like they don't even need to, like the public is just seemingly like we're so tribal, and I feel like anything like I mean, I don't know what like part of Twitter you're on if you're on Twitter, but I like,
Oh, I'm on Twitter. My whole Twitter feed is like Black Hotep libertarian anarchists. So as far as I'm concerned, that's the only people in the world, according to my Twitter feed. That's all I see anything
do
from.
you ever like click through the comments on
All of them.
like some crate, like maybe it's like Donald Trump Jr.'s post, and
Oh
I
yeah.
just see these comments, dude, and it's like both people are living in a totally non-existent world that they would go to war for like either. It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
literally crazy, dude.
Yeah,
But
it does seem like they would totally go to war because I feel like I feel like we are already in a war, and the warriors that are in this war, whether they're social justice warriors or the Q warriors, they're both just extremely strong poles on either side of a spectrum. And it's all about the polarity and getting those poles just charged up with energy so they can beam the signal out to others and attract more, just like a dowsing rod, you know?
damn, that's pretty poetic or meta. You think that's like like kind of like you're saying like a cosmic scale?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think there's real, I mean, I don't know. I think that the whole DJT legacy, the Trump presidency was all about putting him in a position to completely divide people and polarize people. And it's just been catapulted up to the just nth degree. Like they broke the knob on the division machine, and they had to draw 11 after the 10 on it because they just broke the knob on it. And now it's just like a machine that keeps learning itself. It's like a self-fulfilling, self-learning machine now. I mean, all they have to do is
You're
just
so
drop,
right,
they
dude.
just drop a little bit of chum into the ocean,
So
and then
right.
everyone just starts eating each other. And I even see it. I mean, I mean, watching it lately in Liberty Twitter, like the Liberty movement, all the libertarians on Twitter now are just all up in arms against each other because of a conversation that three people had and a couple names were dropped, and it wasn't in the nicest way. And so now there's just like watching these people that are supposedly unifying in a big force, in a big show of force for liberty, to spread the message of human liberty and dignity and personal responsibility. Now even they're dividing and subdividing because of some people that were just talking shit about each other, you know. And it
Yeah.
gets everyone just up in arms. People are just ready to go to war, and they're in a war. They think they're in a war because they are in a war, and so they should feel like they're in a war. And something that I've been noticing that is still happening, though not as much, because it's not being covered nearly as much as it was last summer, because last summer was the summer of love and all of the violence and protests. I remember watching it in real life on the street on Burnside in Portland, in real life with my own human eyes.
Yeah.
And then also seeing it on many different screens throughout the summer, is watching everyone go through the throes of ecstasy as they have transformed themselves into this role of warrior. And it goes both ways. It's like there's the social justice warrior, the clown, joker, protester, rioter person who earlier in the day was maybe a barista or someone's ex-boyfriend, or, you know, a student, or working some grind job. And then by nightfall, they're in full-on warrior mode, and you see them screaming and losing their voice and taking their shirts off and fighting with cops and getting sprayed in the face, and all this physical animation of everyone involved in these conflicts. I see it like through the lens of like a piece of art where you see like the classical paintings of people in the throes of ecstasy, and you can see that people, I don't know, I'm trying to get this in just a few words, but something I've been trying to wrap my brains around is like they've decided that their terrestrial life on Earth is predictable and boring and benign and not fulfilling. And so now when they've been given an opportunity to go to war, to fight a battle that they believe in wholeheartedly, whether it's for racial justice or you're a policeman fighting to keep the peace of the city that you work in. Either one, it doesn't matter. You take on that role. And then by taking on that role, you fill that slot. And in that role play, the role that you're playing is much bigger and more important than your already fairly insignificant, vapid life that you were living just earlier in the day. And now you're kind of overcome and overwhelmed with the responsibilities of that role. And so you have no problem at all throwing a Molotov cocktail at a building, or trying to blow up a car, or beating some protester with a stick, because you're in the throes of ecstasy of the role that's been afforded to you, that's been adopted, that you've taken on willingly. And if that continues day in and day out, eventually there is no more benign, vapid, meaningless person. There's only that role player. Damn. And that role player just gets bigger and stronger until all of the thoughts and all of the cognition and all of the meaning of that fight becomes bigger and more important than the person who's actually fighting it. And then they just end up transforming. And in that transformation, there's an ecstasy. And you see it in how much fun it looks like everyone is having in this fight. Right. It certainly looks like a lot of fun. Even I'm trying to imagine, through the eyes of the protesters, in the cop's face, just spitting on him. Like, I don't think that looks fun, but that person who's doing that is in the throes of ecstasy. You're overcome. Right. Yeah. They're overcome. And then the cop that's just fighting back or just holding steadfast with his baton is also in the throes of ecstasy. And when they're finally having to kick off someone from their leg, or they're jumping on their paddy wagon and they're patrolling the streets, they're also in that role, and they're in the throes of ecstasy. And then it just becomes really powerful. And that becomes powerful. And that pleasure, what's happening is you have massive, massive dopamine injections from your brain. So you're chemically reaffirming all of that stuff on a biological level. So even if it's just a personality thing, or you like being mad at cops, or you've always had a grudge, you've always hated these people, whether it's cops or not, it doesn't matter. Once you get into that thing and you have an action that is fulfilling and brings you a sense of pleasure, even if it's just a glimmer of ecstasy, your body responds with chemicals to consecrate that feeling. And then you just get flooded with it. And then eventually you start developing new neural pathways in your mind that are specifically for that action. And it becomes more and more familiar and easier to do every time you do it. And I think that's why it's harder for these people, for people to stop. It becomes a habit, I guess is what I'm saying. It becomes really hard to kick that habit once the habit's been rewarded chemically, and then also rewarded socially, maybe even rewarded economically. I don't know. That's kind of a long tirade, but that's some of the thoughts I've been having.
Dead. I mean, I always say this to like my fiance, but it seems like these groups are filled with people that like, they lack that sense of belonging, and maybe,
and now they have it.
Yeah. And then they get like love bombed unconditionally, as long as like it's unconditional, as long as either A, like you're, part of the alphabet group, or if you fight these causes that, you may feel somewhat, and they just love affirm you. And I think you did that great, dude. You make it seem, and even on the other side, the cops, you're right. They probably, they ride around in that gear and that military outfit ready for war. And it just like,
and so think about the role play of it as well. Like there's that term LARPing, like live action role play. Right. And when you first see the Antifa type people, and I'm just going to call them Antifa because that's what they want to be called. And they play the role because first they put on the costume, which is all black, which I appreciate because I think black is the best statement against any kind of fashion. I mostly wear all black.
Nice.
I love it. So first they put on the costume, and then they're playing the role with their costumes. And then as the scene, and I'm just going to paint this out as if it's theater, because it really is. They just don't know that they're in a play. They don't know that they're in theater, but it is theater. So then the scene opens up. All the actors are in place. Everyone's fully adorned in their costumes, which have been curated meticulously down to the thread. And now the scene opens up and director calls, all right, action. And everyone goes into their movements. And it seems it's all natural and it's improv and it's working. Okay, end scene, next day's production, there's a little bit more costume. And so now the role players themselves, they're upping it a little bit. They're getting ballistic helmets. Now they have ballistic helmets. They didn't have ballistic helmets at first, but now they have ballistic helmets. Now they have those green lasers. Now they're actually making shields and batons out of old barrels and things like that. And so there's like, they're stepping into the role in such a way that they're adopting more and more auxiliary pieces of this role themselves to fill out that theater, to fill out that scene, to make it so it's like every day they step onto the set, it's like Braveheart.
Damn, you know? Dude, you are a poet, man. Jeez. But you're absolutely right, dude.
I'm just an artist, but that's just the way I see it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that they're playing these things out like it's theater because it is theater. And so my lady and I, we went downtown last summer after, it's kind of in the middle of it, maybe it was in August, just to kind of see like, okay, how big is the stage? Because on Twitter and on the news, it would have you think, and of course, everyone is talking about it. All the conspiracy podcasts, everyone is saying, Portland is burning. They're burning the whole town down. And it's like, right. No, they're not. Actually 4 blocks southwest, they're actually building buildings. There's development happening all over the place.
Wow.
It's just this one little square mile zone that was the stage. And then as we did more research, we figured out that that stage happens to be right in the middle of what's called an opportunity zone. Do you guys know about opportunity zones?
I've heard that phrase before.
So an opportunity zone is basically like an offloading vessel for venture capitalists and equity firms to offload lots and lots of money into real estate assets so that they can avoid paying massive capital gains tax. So every big city, and I learned this from Catherine Austin Fitts, every big city that was undergoing massive civil unrest last summer had an opportunity zone, and the civil unrest was located precisely along the edges and with the interior of the opportunity zones, which happened to be adjacent to or contained a branch of the Federal Reserve Bank. And so the opportunity is, they call it opportunity zones because they want you to think that this is a open real estate market and anyone has an opportunity to jump in and start a business. And while that's true, they also have the opportunity to pay continually skyrocketing rent prices, never really own the building. They're just paying rent. And when things get small enough, or if there's an opportunity for larger investment firms to bring bigger movements into the town, maybe it's tech companies, they want to allocate all their servers into a particular square mile. And so what they can do is, since they have this opportunity zone and it's all just liquefied assets, they can literally liquefy those assets through property damage. So hence that brings you to all the torching of the buildings, all the breaking of the windows, all the destruction of property. Because first you have businesses that are deemed non-essential. So they're closed anyway. They're not making any money, but they're still on the hook for rent.
Right.
And then they can't pay the rent. So the insurance, maybe they'll get a little rent agreement from their landlord, or maybe they'll get some of the stimmy money to carry them through for the next couple months, but they're still on the hook for insurance. And then eventually they can't pay it. And so then they leave. So then you have an abandoned building that's boarded up. There's no business going on, and it's just sitting there. People aren't going to get their rent from it because there's no money to be had to pay the rent. So the best opportunity then is just to burn it all down so that the owners of the building, the real investors, can collect off of the insurance and then build something better, build back better somewhere else, or maybe rebuild it, but then jack the rent up so it's even harder for people to get in there again.
Wow. Almost like a 9/11, Larry Silverstein, but like how he took those buildings down, collected the insurance.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't, it's like makes more money that way than to fix up a building, or you have more control, right?
It works.
Sounds like,
it's kind of just right out of the playbook.
Right.
And so when you start, and Catherine Austin Fitts pointed out that all the cities that had the major civil unrest, this was all happening in the same type of opportunity zones with the same federal branch federal bank branches that were there. And it's just all very interesting to me. And I didn't know anything about the opportunity zone stuff until I actually looked at it myself and saw where the border of the opportunity zone was just
wild.
Basically cradling what we call the stage of Portland. That 1 square mile was just a stage, and all these things, look staged, because I think that they actually were staged, and all the dupes that were out there playing their roles in a larger theater had no idea that they were actually instrumental in the destruction and the devaluation of all that property for it to be bought up by larger investment firms and put further out of reach of poor people, honestly.
I think that's very totally plausible theory, dude, because we just are such pawns of them. Like, again, going back to like the littlest thread and now once they like set that boulder rolling down the hill, it just gets more and more steam. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's especially there,
chum in the water. It's fun. And then it's just like, and over the last year, man, I mean, I know you've seen it, Jack. It's like, in my estimation, about every 4 days, there's a new bucket of bloody chum that they just dump into the water. Every 4 days, there's this like, this. Oh, now it's this. Oh, yeah, tired of that. Really well, here we got a new one for you. It's a big bucket of chum. It's the Fauci email dumps. And when that gets bored and goes nowhere, it's like, John McAfee was Epstein.
Here, let's talk, because that was one thing we like agreed on. So there's so much, I saw so many people, maybe I'm just too cynical, but what's your take on what happened with Mr. John McAfee?
Man, I think John McAfee was one of the most brilliant real life pirates who's ever lived. I have no idea if he's actually, I know he was a real person because people I know and respect and have talked to personally have had interviews with him. And I know he's real. I don't know if he's real rich. I don't know. I do know that he's real wanted. He was real wanted by the feds for a long time. I don't know if he's a real murderer like people have portrayed him to be, but I do know that he was in jail in Spain. And the very same day or the day after he got approved for extradition to the United States to face criminal charges in the U.S. justice system, he ended up dead in his jail cell. I know all that is true. And I think it's interesting that it seems beyond the pale for most people to accept that he just may have actually killed himself as a giant fuck you to the system. Like, no one's going to get me. I'm not going to play your game. I'm not going to go through your kangaroo courts where you're going to break my back and you're going to bankrupt him and everyone in his family or anyone who knows him. Because that's what they would do first, is they would basically hold his girlfriend hostage. They would say, if well, then she's responsible for all of your debts. And then I know that he knew that he would never, ever, ever win, because when you enter the U.S. justice system, as a defendant, you put up everything. The state puts up nothing. Even if they get it wrong, they don't lose. If you get it wrong, you're done. You put up everything. You have no defense. There is no way he could have possibly defended himself. They would have strung it out and made a classic example out of him, like an Al Capone type example. And I think it's not impossible. I'm not saying I'm 100% sure, but the idea that he would voluntarily take himself out of that potential outcome, to me, makes the most sense. But no one can possibly fathom that, it seems. And most of the conspiracy-minded people out there that I love their minds, but they're so hooked on the Epstein thing that they think that John McAfee got Epstein, that he had to have been killed. And my question is, like, what kind of a gatekeeper was John McAfee? We know about Epstein. We know that there's no way he could have ever made it to trial.
Right.
There's no way. He was too vain, too weak, and too much of a liability for all the people in the pedocracy that is fucking real to have him take another human breath, especially on the stand, because he would roll like a donut, dude. There's no way.
Nice. Dude,
so they had
metaphors.
They had to take him out. They had to take him out.
Yeah.
And the whole Epstein thing versus John McAfee thing, I don't think that they're equal at all. I don't think John McAfee was a gatekeeper for anything. But then they say, oh, well, what about the 31 terabytes of dirt on Clinton? And I'm just like, get the fuck out of here, dude. Everyone has dirt on the Clintons.
Yeah.
Everyone has dirt on the Clintons. And everyone can prove a case. And again, nothing will ever happen to the Clintons. Nothing will ever happen to the Clintons. Period.
No, they're
I think
in Gitmo, dude. They're in Gitmo.
I think, right now. Yeah, that's right. Because Trump's secret president, and they got him thousands of sealed indictments. Any day they're going to perp Walker.
Oh, any day, dude. It already happened.
It already happened. We just weren't allowed to see it.
Yeah, that's right, dude.
So I just don't think it's impossible that maybe he really took agency and authority over his life and ended it voluntarily rather than have it be sucked and whittled away by the grinding gears of the American justice system, in which he would never have a chance to even be honestly heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's much more like we saw that tweet, the 31 terabytes or whatever, that was photoshopped. They were trying to tie that with the apartment complex or whatever. And
yeah, the apartment complex, that's a whole nother thing.
We watched, like, I've watched John McAfee interviews, and RIP, I was a drug addict, but he was just somebody who loved to hear his own voice talk. He was often pretty inebriated, and he's
a character, man.
Yeah. And he, his story was bigger. He wanted to have the biggest story. And this is the best way in my mind. Like, he looked, that last photo they showed of him, he looked horrible. He's probably been withdrawing for the past 3 months because he used heroin for the past 30 years of his life. And
especially if he was in a Spanish prison, it's not impossible. It's probably likely he would have been able to get some shit, but maybe not enough. And maybe this was just the end of the line for him.
Right, dude.
I mean, to me, it just makes the most sense. If you really want to stick it to the man, and that your back is like part, not only against the wall, but now is part of the wall, why not just take yourself out?
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly,
this create an awesome story.
Of course. And then, of course, imagine, and I don't think John McAfee was like a super benevolent person that had the altruistic best wishes for humankind on his mind. I just don't think so. I think he was a self-serving son of a bitch, and a rad one at that, like a super rad one. Someone we should all look up to, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
We should emulate and take that path. But I'm not saying people should go put a gun in their mouth. But if it's that, or know that you're going to be tortured in an American prison, and there's no chance at all of survival, and you're already old and decrepit and you're fucking broke, for all we know, he was totally broke.
Yeah.
He had I mean, who knows? Maybe he was a bazillionaire. But even then, so let's just say that he did have billions and zillions of dollars. Now, where is it? He's dead.
Mm-hmm.
The feds can't get a hold of it unless it was never there to begin with, or unless they already owned it, or unless maybe he was an agent. I mean, that's not impossible either. Maybe John McAfee was an agent. But I just love that all the conspiracy podcast people are just like, he was Epstein, man. He didn't kill himself. He would never. And I just don't think the two are exclusive. I mean, are mutually inclusive. I just don't think they're the same. And that apartment building thing, I mean, I don't know if you saw that recent video of water pouring out of the ceiling of the parking garage.
Damn, no, I didn't see that.
So I read this report on this newsletter that I get from No Agenda. Shout out No Agenda show.
Oh, nice.
No Agenda newsletter. There was many producers, as you may or may not know, with No Agenda. It's all listener produced. So all the listeners are producers because they basically create the show by sending in all their information from all over the world, all different kinds of people. One of the producers is a structural engineer who works for one of the largest engineering firms in the UK. They do massive, massive projects. This guy knows his shit. He's no slouch. And he said that he looked over the entire incident report of the apartment collapse and saw that rather than it being a direct energy weapon attack or a deliberate implosion or a takedown like Tower 7, that it looked to him that it was just decades of neglect and water damage next to salt water, which is extremely corrosive to what is that type of concrete? Like it's like a treated concrete kind of thing.
Right. And
it was just super duper corrosive. And whoever owned the building knew that there were troubles with the foundation, and they just never addressed it. And so that's just this guy's opinion. And I think it's entirely possible that this guy knows what he's talking about. Of course, he didn't lay human eyes on it himself, but I tend to favor no agenda listeners because they're pretty fucking smart people.
Yeah.
And then we see videos like just a day later after this newsletter of, for some reason, like apparently, allegedly, this is mainstream media saying that this was just hours before the collapse. But someone's video, first of all, why is someone standing in front of the apartment building videoing just hours before a collapse? What you see in the video is you literally see hundreds of gallons of water pouring out from the floor level of the apartment building into the parking garage. And the parking garage is what had the structural problems. And then when you look into the parking garage in the video, you can see that it is just filled with broken chunks of concrete, like massive debris already cluttering up this parking garage. And then water is just pouring out of it. And according to even their own reports, there had been water and flooding issues in that parking garage for years that never got remedied. And then just so happens that the whole thing just collapsed. I don't know if it was a stage thing, but I tend to think that it was more just years and years of neglect. And who knows if McAfee even had an apartment in that building.
I'm sure he didn't, dude. I know that at the end of his tweet was photo, but I think you bring up a good point. Like in this, I don't know, maybe like hyper vigilant, like because everything's happening so quick
every day.
Maybe it's like social media too. Everyone wants to be like that first voice that like solved the riddle. That now there's so many narratives that get pushed out that like, accidents, things happen, like coincidences do happen, and not everything like is part of this, huge ring. I don't know, like like McAfee can kill himself, a building can collapse, and it doesn't have deal with Q and Trump saving the children from the underground cabal.
I know. Yeah. And even Epstein could have just been strangled out by some big meathead in his cell because he's a pussy. That could have totally happened. The meathead could have been bribed to kill him because he's a gatekeeper.
Right.
Both things are equally possible and probably true at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of why I like you, and I like your position on this, Jack, is because, I mean, against our better judgment, sometimes things are just a coincidence. Sometimes shit just happens, and it happens to fall right in line with something else. But just because it walks like a duck and talks like a duck doesn't always mean it's a duck.
Yeah. And sometimes I don't want to
it might be a goose.
No,
who looks a lot like a duck. Looks a lot like a duck. Their eggs look really similar, but they're not the same.
But yeah, dude, I don't know if it's like social. I think that's it. Like everyone's get that, like, those, again, going back to like your dopamine rush of like, this was the guy who broke the story or solved this case.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of like even goes along with the whole Q thing, like those puzzles and people being the one that solves it or whatever have you. I don't know, dude. But so you were talking about you're big in the liberty movement. So I guess to end like on I'm
not super big in it.
But you follow it, right?
I follow it and I observe it.
So I wanted your take, because I've got this will be like our last topic, but like, what's your take on the liberty movement, the libertarian belief system?
That's a good one, man. I'm not any sort of authority or even really knowledgeable about it. I'm not a scholar of Murray Rothbard or any of those people, or Lou, what's his name? Lou Rockwell. I like those guys. I've read some of their stuff, but by no means am I an advocate for it. I think it's interesting that there is a libertarian party to begin with. I think that the idea of it, actually having a stake in the game, like having some skin in the game, is a pipe dream. I don't think that the polarities will allow a third pole, a third pillar.
Nice.
I just don't think that's ever going to happen. And what happens as a result is you have this ongoing Hegelian dialectic of a problem and a reaction and a solution. You have a thesis and an antithesis, and somewhere in the middle is the synthesis. And that, let's just say, for sake of argument, that synthesis is libertarianism. And then libertarianism is going to spawn another antithesis. And that antithesis thesis is going to spawn another synthesis, and it's just going to go on forever. And so the big controversy right now is that there's a libertarian dude who's very well known. Shout out Dave Smith, part of the problem.
Yes.
I love this guy. I've been listening to him for years. He turned me on to the ideas of liberty and libertarianism. I don't ascribe to be a libertarian. I tend to live more of an agorist libertarian lifestyle, but by no means do I engage in the debate, which is really, at the end of the day, that's all it is to me. And my observation is that the libertarian movement is just a glorified debate club of autists, of autistic people who get hung up on details, and they just keep passing proverbs back and forth to each other and challenging each other on the details and the interpretations of Murray Rothbard or Lew Rockwell. Who's better? Who would win in the cage match between Murray Rothbard and Joe Biden? It's just like this. It's just boring to me. So anyway, Dave Smith is thinking about running for president.
Right.
Apparently, that seems to be the word on the street. I know that he knows because he said it. I just listened to him on Pete Quinones' show that he's like, I'm not going to win, but if I can use the platform to get more people aware of an idea of liberty, I'm 100% for that. And I'll totally do that. And it's not his fault. I mean, maybe it is his fault that he's a successful comic. He's a successful podcast host. He shills products like crazy on his show because he's a capitalist, and I respect that too. But the big argument is that, like, dude, you can't be a libertarian and expect to use the system to upend the system. What you're really talking about, and this is what I tend to observe, and it's just me, guys, and I don't know, so you can get mad at me all you want. I think that you can't claim to want to eventually at some point dissolve the government by joining and growing the government.
Yeah, right.
You just can't do it. And so if your intention to do it is to further your platform or use that platform to turn people on to ideas of liberty like Ron Paul, I think that's great. And I think that the argument people are making against Dave is you can't don't make promises to people that you can't deliver, because we all know, and even Dave knows, that there's no way he's ever going to stand a chance of winning an election. They won't even allow the Libertarian Party on the ticket.
Right.
So,
right.
But if he can at least get there, he can bring people to mind. And other people are saying, oh, fuck you, Dave. You just want more listeners to your podcast. That's all you want, is just grow your brand. And then and there's the libertarians that are saying that. And I'm like, excuse me, but isn't that part of the anarcho-capitalist disposition that you claim to adore, is just growing your brand? And then there's this whole idea about the non-aggression principle, which is a big deal in the libertarian community. The NAP is the thing, that no one has any sort of divine right to aggress on another in any way or form. And while I think that is true on a physical level, when it comes to human beings, there seems to be no limit to the aggression in the market. So where does the line stop and start with the non-aggression principle? Is it just personal property? Is it intellectual property? Is it market property? Because if you can aggressively market your product in a free market and make as much money as you want or can, which is part of what libertarians want to do, being anarcho-capitalists, and I'm totally on board with that. Does the NAP apply to market value? I don't know. I just think those are interesting questions. And that concept rolled through my little brain like 2 weeks ago, thinking about the non-aggression principle and versus like aggressively pushing your product and starting an entrepreneur. And then eventually, I mean, maybe, a venture capitalist, a venture capitalist firm will just eat up little businesses left and right and left and right. And, then there's the whole private company, bro. You do what you want to do. Right. If you're a private company, you can eat up as many other private companies as you want. And that should be, and I thought that was embraced by the libertarian anarcho-capitalist ideas. So I don't know. I just have a lot of unanswered questions, and I don't like to engage in any of it because ultimately, at the end of the day, Jack, I hate groups. I hate all groups. Any party of more than 3 people, I don't want to be there. I don't want to be associated with groups. I don't ever want to join groups. I like being invited to parties as long as I know that when I leave, I'm not going to hurt anyone's feelings, because I'm just going to do an Irish goodbye and just dip out,
Dude, I think that's a perfect, I have the same questions as you. So, but I don't like groups. So we're very similar. So where can everyone find you, Dean? Like, I know you're you're focusing on your art, how can they support you?
People can continue to support the show by listening to Up is Down whenever I make episodes, which has been a while now. I apologize to anyone who's been waiting for new episodes. I just haven't been, honestly, I haven't been into it, man. I've been really kind of bummed, not bummed, but just sort of bored with kicking the can down the road as far as pointing out all the hypocrisy and social engineering, mind control stuff. Like, it's just boring to me now, because I don't think anyone is confused anymore about what they think about it, at least as far as coronavirus goes, which is the meatiest bone on the rib, is the coronavirus thing. And I just don't have anything more to say about it. So I've just been working on other kind of artwork, but people can still listen to Up is Down podcast. You can find that anywhere you find podcasts. And I may produce this for my own show as a swapcast. I got some other stuff kind of cooking in the fire. I just had a really cool road trip down to the high desert here in Oregon and spent some time on a guy's farm. And that was really gratifying, spending some time in the desert and in the canyon lands. It's a good change of scenery for me, just for a little while. So it's pretty inspiring, but for the most part, I've just been working on different kinds of art and kind of getting back into that. And it's funny because I started making the podcast as a pivot away from art because I was going through a weird chemical thing as far as questioning my addictive personality and exactly what level of addiction I have to cannabis or alcohol, and going through this whole process. And over the last 25 years, I've married these different misuses and abuses of those substances with my art. And so when I kicked those substances it was cool for 25 years when I would just get super fucked up and make rad art.
Yeah.
And then when I stopped getting super fucked up, I tried to make rad art. It changed, which is what happens.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure how I could reconcile that change and continue to make art that was satisfying to me without being super loaded. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds really juvenile and strange, but that's just the way I've operated for 25 years. And so I decided to make the podcast as a pivot away from that and to learn a whole new art form and a whole new craft. And that's been really rewarding. I've learned so much. I feel like the podcast has done its job.
Nice.
And I'm grateful for the last year and a half of going through the coronavirus stuff. I'm super grateful for all this mind control shit, because it's allowed me to really explore the vehicle of podcasting and produce valuable artwork and valuable product for people on a much larger audience instantly, in a much deeper, richer way than just putting paint on wood or canvas. So it's been extremely edifying, and I'm grateful, and I'm going to continue to make shows. I just don't know what I'm going to make shows about, because I'm really focused on, I'm pivoting back into making art now. And I've been going through this for weeks, where I've just been trying to reconcile being okay with that, like that it's okay that I don't produce shows every week or two, because I have listeners that are waiting for my episodes, because people sometimes donate money to me, to the show. And while I appreciate that, that comes with a different level of bondage and a different level of indebtedness to these people, because I want to give them what they're paying for.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's all voluntary exchanges. They don't have to. If they want to rescind their donations to me, the ones that are on like a reoccurring thing, no hearts broken over here. I just want to be free of as many obligations to other groups as I can. And so I've just really been having a good time making art and making shows and collecting content and stuff. But that's a long-winded way of basically telling people that don't expect a lot from Up is Down right away. Because I might not make anything. I might make something next week. It might be another month before another episode comes out. I don't know. I try to just do as the muse directs me to do. And the muse has been directing me to really tuck into this homestead here at the chalet and make a different kind of art right now, and try to streamline some alternative and diverse levels of potential income. And so that's just kind of where I'm at. But yeah, awesome. Up is Down podcast, you can find anywhere. You can also check me out at deanreiner.com. I'm at Up is Down on Twitter. And I haven't been active in any of those things for a while.
Well, I'll put all your links in the show notes, and I'll probably send you, if you want the show, I'll send it to you tomorrow, the MP3 of it, if you want to use it. And but Dean, really, you're a poet. You are an artist. Thanks for being on the show, dude. And we'll do it again.
Hell yeah, Jack. This is a really cool time, man. I'm glad it
Awesome,
didn't
dude.
go for like 3 hours because I can make these things go for so long. I can't shut up.
No, dude, you're a wordsmith.
Dude,
You take care.
I was down in the desert with my pal, who's actually someone who I met through the podcast.
Oh,
and
nice.
I just drove down there and hung out with him on his farm. And I swear, dude, we talked for like 12 hours straight. Like we just could not shut up.
That's funny, dude.
But it was
Oh,
great. It was a magical place. But yeah, man, thanks for the opportunity,
of
Jack. I really
course, dude.
appreciate it. This
I'll
has been
send
really
it to
cool.
you, and you take care. Have a good night, and we'll talk soon, dude.